So, this brings us to our Muppet or Muppets of the month,
We
and
have
I have
multiple Muppets, don't we?
we do, yeah. I have a particularly uh, juicy topic, I suppose. It's hard to identify exactly who the Muppet is, and you threw a Muppet in this morning into the agenda, which
I
I've been
did. It's a
looking for.
brand new Muppet.
A brand new Muppet, yeah. You can still smell the foam and everything. It's great. Okay, so the first Muppet of the month, the one that was on the agenda, comes from a story that actually I missed. It's a story that was being put about by the Sun and also the Daily Mail. That oh God, the U.
That is such a brilliant citation. You know?
Yes.
The Sun and the Daily Mail.
No, no, I was
Footnote
just.
one, footnote two.
I know, I know.
Sorry.
So the Sun. UFO experts go wild over five bizarre 1,700-year-old mummies in Peru that look closer to reptiles than humans. And the Daily Mail went with proof of aliens or another hoax. Conspiracy theorists claim they have found a three-fingered, mummified humanoid with elongated skull in a South American cave. Now, this has come about by a group of people researching in conjunction with a website called Gaia.com, and there is a YouTube video associated with this. I'll put a link to that also below.
A YouTube video
A
kills some
YouTube.
trees.
I know, I know. Hang on, don't you mock the very medium that we're broadcasting on. But yes, there is a YouTube video, and there is your typical sort of analysis going on of this thing that does look like an alien. But unnervingly, LiveScience.com has come across evidence and a statement by some specialists, a signed statement, that seems to indicate that these remains are more than likely than not. They've been tampered with. Basically, they are probably a Nazcan crouching burial, a fairly famous sort of. Also, I think sort of like an Incan type of burial. People often sort of
Yeah.
call it that, which has been, in some cases, pulled apart and reconstructed to have three digits on the fingers, on the hands, sorry, three digits on the feet, and possibly also to have its face slightly reconstructed to look a little bit more like a so-called grey alien. One of the statements said that I particularly find repulsive the idea that anyone would dare to dehumanize deceased human bodies. You can't take away the condition of a human to a human being. So this isn't beyond the idea of this being a hoax. What really pushes this, I think, into the realm of being actually more than just a Muppet, actually downright being disgusting, is the idea of having reconstituted and reconstructed human remains, possibly from multiple sources, to create a fake for the sake of basically entertainment. I mean, what do you think of this?
Well, obviously, I've looked at the same material that you have, and I think the analysis that it's faked is pretty convincing.
Yeah.
Of course, it's convincing. There are no such things as alien burials. It's as I think Blackadder said about the theory of deterrence, that in the run up to the First World War, there was one problem with the theory: it was bollocks. I suppose, in a sense, though, the thing that it made me think of were the kind of the cockatrice from the Cabinet of Curiosities.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that people have been doing with animals and perhaps humans too for a very long time indeed. This is just a modern spin on something that is, a deliberate hoax, either for well, actually no, they're almost always to make money.
Yeah.
This is clickbait.
Yeah. Well, and also the Live Science article does a very good job of highlighting that some of the experts that are quoted talking about the chromosome count on this discovery is a made-up expert from a made-up institution
That doesn't exist. Yeah.
It doesn't exist, and also crucially on the YouTube video description, I've highlighted here they say a new anomalous discovery has been unearthed in Peru. Join Gaia's ongoing investigation and decide for yourself if this is proof of a non-human species. Now this ties into everything we've been talking about this month in terms of open access, but also actually fringe archaeological theories. This is the appeal of the fringe, is the opportunity to decide for yourself. But the big difference here, this is not simply making the evidence available to people, this is willfully misleading people, pointing them towards an erroneous opinion, especially when you are quoting, when you're making up, experts, so-called, to push the idea that this is in fact a legitimate alien or whatever. I'm also reminded actually of, in this instance, of there's a mermaid skeleton at a museum. I forgot. Can you remember the name of the museum in London?
Is it the Horniman?
That's it, the Horniman. Yes. When I first saw it, I wasn't sure if it was Horny Man. Like what? No, the Horniman Museum.
It's the tea company, Mark.
Yes. Tea. My wife loves some tea. It can be an aphrodisiac, but
we won't go there.
No. Make me some tea. No. In all seriousness, So people have been flocking to see these biological constructions for a while. There's a famous one, of course, in terms of the let me get this right, Piltdown Man.
Piltdown Man, absolutely.
Yeah, that was human remains,
a medieval
orangutan,
skull and a great ape jaw.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this isn't new, but it's the medium that makes it more compelling. And so when it gets to the point that the Sun and the Daily Mail are even offering this up, perhaps with a slightly less than obvious tongue-in-cheek, but unless they're offering this up, it's just disingenuous, and it really does go into that realm of muppetry. Not just because they are presenting alternative ideas and creating evidence to support these alternative ideas, but actually it looks highly likely that they've been pulling human remains apart in order to make them look inhumane. It's disgusting. It simply is.
I'm not going to argue.
Okay. It's one of those things. It is one of those things where I don't think you can take another opinion on that. It's a simple.
Yes. I suppose if you wanted to, you could say, it's part of the whole postmodern idea that everything is an artifice. So why not make an artifice? Yeah. But I think in this case, the misuse of human remains, if that's what has happened, and it appears very likely that is what's happened, it goes against certainly all the ethical principles that our profession works to, and we have those ethics because people are actually upset by it, and the exploitation of human remains like that in the cause of basically clickbait is pretty offensive, actually.
It is deeply offensive, and to be honest, even outside of a professional standard, this sort of behaviour goes against basic, universal human instincts when it comes to human remains.
That's interesting. I'm going to interrupt you there, though, because I'm not sure that it does. I'm doing a lot of work at the moment on illicit wreck diving, and there is a strand of wreck divers who believe that they're perfectly entitled to enter a wreck, including a wreck that has sealed compartments, and take away material even though they still contain human remains.
Yes,
but
those wreck divers come from a culture where human remains are typically buried and or cremated. My point is, in that sense, the wreck divers are a bit like these people from Gaia, whereby they are justifying their actions, but they come from a culture that does not condone them. Yes, there are certain burial rites and practices that involve, for example, the defleshing of bodies and the removal of bones. But the fact of the matter is that these bones are typically either deposited elsewhere or they are otherwise treated in a reverent manner. They're not reconstructed to create an artifice or for a laugh. You know, I suppose. I mean, you could argue that sometimes maybe in the medieval period they went there in order to try and get the occasional boost in people making pilgrimage to certain sites in terms of how they played with and displayed human remains. But still, they weren't saying, "Oh, this is an angel." Now, that has happened in some places. People have created the skeletons of angels, but it's also often deeply offensive to people as well. So and frankly, not even just us. It's clear that, for example, even Neanderthal. I say even. I'm not one of those people who think Neanderthals were basic and stupid, but Neanderthals looked after their human remains. It seems that Homo erectus probably did that as well. It's a deeply ingrained need in our species to be reverent towards the remains of the dead, and I think, it makes me feel a bit sick. So Muppets, but also hideous as well. Anyway, who's your Muppet of the month?
Oh, my Muppet. My Muppet is. Call it. Let me just get the. I need to get this right because I need to get names right here because obviously we're dealing with a quite sensitive issue here.
Okay.
This is my Muppet of the month is Councillor Jim O'Boyle of Coventry City Council. And I'll read you the headline from the Coventry Observer. Exclusive: Council Heritage Officer mysteriously departs amid Tarquins in tweed and Rupert trousers jibe. Now, what you need to know about the background to this is that Coventry City Council, as well as being a city of culture in 2021, is busy regenerating its post-war shopping centre. And it's been looking for developers to do it. And recently, Coventry has had a number of its post-war buildings listed by Historic England.
Well, and incidentally, it's worthwhile, just in the context, again, for people who may not know, Coventry suffered particularly badly during the
which meant that it was redeveloped after the war with some quite striking modern architecture, the most famous example being Coventry Cathedral.
Yeah. Which is actually one of those instances where I like it. I quite like the juxtaposition of the medieval or sort of the Gothic ruin and the modern architecture next to it. So yeah,
absolutely, I'm completely with you with that. I lived in Coventry for a while and worked in the area, and it's a very striking juxtaposition, as you say, of the medieval cathedral church and the post-war cathedral with the glass in particular is wonderful.
Yeah,
it's a wonderful, light, airy building. But anyway, some of the other modern buildings, post-war buildings in Coventry, are perhaps in need of some refreshment. They were built in the 50s and 60s, but some of them are particularly striking. Historic England, as is their job, have recently listed some of the more remarkable and nationally important examples, and it has to be a pretty serious building to get a listing, even at grade 2. It's only a small percentage of buildings that do qualify for this. But the problem that Councillor O'Boyle has identified is that listing might cause problems for the developers that the council is hoping to attract. And this is what he said. For the first time in nearly 20 years, we have owners who want to work to upgrade the upper precinct, which is the area of the shopping centre he's talking about, to restore it to its former glory. Owners of various buildings want to invest and make this happen. Then along comes Historic England, an unaccountable quango made up of non-Coventrians dressed in tweeds and Rupert trousers to lay down the law according to Tarquin and his friends at the grouse shooting club. They decide they like buildings so much they want to list them, forgetting the damage to Waterstones, which of course had its canopy removed, but don't let the truth get in the way of an arcane hobby. On the face of it, listing presents no issue in terms of the recognition of the buildings themselves. Rather than work constructively with the owners of these buildings, not the council by the way, they insist on arbitrarily listing regardless of impact. Ouch.
Yeah.
Councillor O'Boyle is showing a complete ignorance of what listing is about, and how, you know, a council like Coventry actually, you know, which prides itself on its medieval past. It has a number of wonderful, again, medieval buildings that survived the wartime bombing, and it's beginning to promote itself as a sort of a tourist centre on that basis.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely failing to recognise that the historic environment now begins. You know, the historic environment begins yesterday, and that modern buildings are as worthy of protection. Some modern buildings, a small percentage of modern buildings, are as worthy of protection as a medieval hall house or you know, a priory church. And unfortunately, I mean, I picked him out really. It's a little bit unfair to pick him out by name.
Well,
actually, no,
it's not unfair. It's a matter of public record, but also
it's a matter of public. He went on the record on his blog and said that, you know.
Well, but also in this instance, it is actually Muppetry. My pick was reprehensible behaviour. This is just someone being an absolute Muppet, and also in some respects, this idea that I think it speaks again to some of the issues we've been talking about in this month's podcast. It speaks to how the public at large sometimes is encouraged to look at the interests of archaeologists and historians when it comes to the public good. The idea that we are hobbyists, the idea that we are essentially just antiquarians, gentlemanly folk who go, wouldn't it be a shame if we lost that particular veneer? It's
absolutely.
It's important. Absolutely. It's important that we continue to tackle this sort of stuff because that's not what we are. That's not what people. Well, then again, actually, there are some people in English heritage who are a bit like that.
Thank you for undercutting my argument. No, I mean, just to finish on this, and there is a serious point here.
Yeah.
We see it in so many places where there's the famous case, and again, back in the early days of the pipeline and the Mortimer Facebook group, one of our earliest. Shall we say, one of our earliest opponents is the wrong word. Persons we entered dialogue with was a councillor from Cambridge, I think it was, who described archaeologists as bunny huggers. I think he got his trees and his bunnies mixed up, I think. But, you know, it was that. It's that idea, particularly among, and I've seen it particularly among politicians, where they see a certain breed of politician anyway sees heritage not as an opportunity, which it should be, but as something that's in the way of the future and progress. I've seen it all the way from individual, you know, councillors right up to an elected mayor in one of the London boroughs, who saw any kind of heritage protection on buildings as getting in the way.
Yeah, and again, this is something that often comes up in the watching brief. People, especially in the comments, talk about this in terms of the fact of the matter is there has to be a balance. There really does have to be a balance in terms of protection and the very real need in certain parts of this country for new housing, especially. But in this instance, we're not talking about new housing development. We're talking about the relationship between the buildings that are there, the new proposed plans, and essentially a public space. And as I alluded to right at the beginning of this, Coventry nationally is important for that relationship between the pre and the post Second World War. Yeah. It's very important, and it's in some respects it's a little bit like Milton Keynes, certainly, in terms of people sort of slightly wryly go, oh yeah, Coventry, what a lovely place to live. But this is an opportunity as well for them to be highlighting, as you say, the history that is there, and to really go for that element of it being a meeting place where the 20th century meets the medieval, and therefore being sensitive to the requirements to make changes carefully.
That's exactly the point, and good architects too and good developers recognise that. and work within the disciplines and use their imagination to repurpose buildings, to re-nuance buildings, and it can be done brilliantly. We've just seen it recently with some gas holders in King's Cross, which are being repurposed as a circular development for apartments, for flats.
Oh wow! Okay,
and it's it looks it looks stunning. Same thing.
So are they sort of keeping the frame of the gas?
That's
holder?
the idea. Yes, and obviously you have this circular,
almost like
artifact,
a cylindrical balloon that expands. Really, yes,
absolutely. Which the apartments sit within. It's done brilliantly.
Wow.
And so it can be done, and it can be done commercially. That was a commercial development. So to say that developers won't, it imposes too many costs on them, it's nonsense.
Yeah,
right developer will see it as an opportunity.
Well, yeah, and also, frankly, an opportunity to win architectural awards, to charge a bit more for the flat.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it can be an opportunity. Yeah, okay. Okay, well, I think we've covered Muppets quite well. Muppets all over the place, and in particular, I really hope we don't see human remains being used like that for a little while, at least, in Watching Brief.